unmute yourself, speak, unmute yourself again when you have finished. If you have a question, please press the symbol of a hand on the screen and I will ask you to speak, one person at a time. If you have any comment to make, you should only raise the symbol of a hand when I ask for comments, and again, I will ask you to speak, one person at a time. If for any reason a member has cause to leave the meeting, then they must indicate this to me before leaving. Please raise your hand or send a message on the online chat. If your screen freezes, but you have heard the whole debate, you may use your discretion or whether to vote. However, if you did not hear the whole debate, then you cannot vote. When we come to the recommendations, I will call out the names of the members of the Audit Committee alphabetically, and you need to advise yes or no, depending whether you're in agreement with the recommendations or not. That's yes or no, whether you agree with the recommendations or not.
Chair, I've just spoken to Mr. Williams. He's trying to log on now. Michelle, can I just confirm he was sent the link?
100%.
Yeah, has he accepted? Yes.
Yeah, I had an email come up. I've deleted the acceptance now because it's so many come through. But yes,
Right.
I had confirmation.
I've just told him to go on now to the Teams and to accept. So hopefully, Chair, he should be with you anytime soon.
Okay.
Unless.
Well,
does Matthew want to give him a ring, perhaps? Matthew, do you want to give his number?
He was trying to get hold of him, I think.
Matthew was. Is
he?
Sorry, Myra, I'm dealing with Tony Rogers at the moment with IT.
Right. I'll try ring him again now then.
Okay. Well, I think we'll carry on now, as it's gone 2 o'clock. So can I ask a member of the Democratic Services staff?
Mr. Williams?
Sorry, Myra, can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry.
Okay.
Right.
Can I ask a member of the Democratic Services staff to mute all members, please, so that I can begin the recording?
Clive, you're going to need to unmute yourself now.
I was waiting for a red light because it says there's a red light coming on, but
so I've muted everyone else apart from yourself now.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is the first meeting of the Audit Committee under these unusual circumstances. So can I welcome you to the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council's Audit Committee of Monday, the 3rd of August. Can you all please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the local authority. And can I just add, if anybody's got a mobile phone by the side of them, can you put that on silent as well, please? Let's start the agenda. Apologies for absence. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Gareth Lewis. We have no other apologies. Item 2.
Sorry, Chair, it was Councillor Tony Rogers.
Right. Is Councillor Rogers with us?
No, Chair, that's apologies from him. He's dealing with IT at the moment, having issues with connection.
All right, right.
Thank you.
We'll put down apologies for the time being. I'm on declarations of interest. Item 2. Any declarations of interest taking into account A and B? We asked for declarations beforehand, before the meeting. I've had none. And there are no declarations of interest, therefore. We then go on to item 3. That's audit inquiries to those charged with governance and management. And it's pages 5 to 14. Steve, can you take us through? Is it possible to show any part of the reports up on the screen?
Chair, I think we agreed that we wouldn't do that, and that people would be viewing the agendas themselves.
All right. Okay. Right. Could I ask Steve to take us through the report, please? Pages 5 to 14.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. And as you can basically see, what we've got here is the audit inquiries to those charged with governance and management. And this is a report that accompanies the actual accounts. And it assists the Wales Audit Office when they come to carry out the actual audit of the accounts. And the Wales Audit Office are seeking views on a number of governance issues which impact upon the actual audit of accounts. And those are relevant to both the management and those charged with governance. Then in appendices 1 to 3, it then sets out the Council's responses. Appendix 1 is in relation to those matters in relation to fraud. Appendix 2 is matters in relation to laws and regulations. And Appendix 3 is in matters in just relation to the related parties. And as you can see then as well from paragraph 3.5, and these responses have just been compiled and in consultation with the Mayor, the Cabinet Member for Governance and Corporate Services, the Head of Legal and Democratic Services, and Audit Manager, and also myself. So if I can go back then to the recommendation at 2.1 and ask if there are any questions at this point.
Thank you. Can I ask members, anybody got any questions? No? No one got any questions? If not, anyone got any comments? Councillor Roberts?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I personally thought all the questions that were raised and asked were answered quite comprehensively, so I was quite content with the responses given.
Okay. Any other comments? No? If there are no other comments, if I can take you then to the recommendations which you'll find in paragraph 2.1. And at this stage, I will take you to the vote. And I need to call you in by alphabetical order. As I said,
sorry, Chair, do we need somebody to move and second it first, or are we going straight to the vote?
Well, I can do that as well.
I'm happy to move it. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Right. Is there a seconder to that?
I'll second it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. And now we'll go to Councillor Jeremy Davis first.
Yeah, I vote for it, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Darren Roberts.
Yes, 4, Chair.
Councillor Tony Rogers is not there. Councillor Declan Salmon.
4, Chair.
Councillor John Thomas.
4, Chair.
Councillor Clive Dovey. Yes. Councillor Clive Dovey. And Robert Williams.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. That's been agreed. We'll now go to item agenda 4. That's the draft statement of accounts for 2019-20, and that's to consider a report of the Chief Executive on its pages 15 to 164. Steve, you're going to start off with this?
It's me again, Chair. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, what we've actually got here is the statement of accounts for last year, which is attached as Appendix A. The actual report itself here is an executive summary of the actual statement of accounts. And at this stage as well, I would just like to thank Adele and the whole of the accountancy team and for all the hard work over the last number of months, which is obviously the accounts have been done in very, very strange times. And it is a reflection as well that the accounts have still been closed, and hopefully they just will be audited and just signed off now in just time as well. Is if you recall that normally the accounts would need to be closed by the 15th of June, but because of the pandemic, the Welsh Government have just allowed the accounts to be closed by the 31st of August. And so obviously we just have closed earlier than that.
Yeah.
And in respect of the actual audit of the accounts and then the report to Council, in normal times, we would then be reporting to Council by the 15th of September. For this year, we have to report the accounts by the 30th of November. So if I go through some of the main sections, it's section 4 then sets out how the accounts were actually compiled, and they've been compiled in their compliance with the international financial reporting standards. And you see those accounting statements then as part of the accounts themselves. Section 5 then just indicates some of the jointly controlled operations. And for Merthyr, those are in respect of Llwyd Crem, the Central South Consortium, and the Cardiff Capital Region City deal. Then if we go into the nitty-gritty of the report, and under paragraph 7, 7.1 indicates our revenue outturn for last year, and you'll note that we have a surplus of nearly £2.9 million reported for last year, which is excellent news. And what it does mean is that we don't have to use any of the reserves which we'd budgeted for in the year, and that was 483,000 from the general reserves and £1.295 million from the budget reserve. And instead, we've managed to put more monies into reserves. So we have a further £1.113 million, which we're able to transfer into the budget reserve. A couple of the main items. We had monies from Llwyd Crem, which was a contribution from their reserves of £720,000. And as you recall as well, Council approved back in December a review and then a revision to the minimum revenue provision policy, and that saved us around £820,000. So itemised in 7.1.2 are the major unders and overs for the financial year. So I just won't go through them in any depth, but they're there for you to see and to read. And again, I should note that a surplus of that magnitude for the year is obviously work well done by both the accountancy team and also every single service across the authority. Then under 7.2, we begin then to look at our capital outturn. And apologies there is a typo just above the table under 7.2. It refers then to the budget for 2018-19, but of course that just should be 1920. So under 7.2.1, you can see there that there was £15.6 million worth of expenditure spent on capital schemes for last financial year, and that was compared to the planned capital spend of £17.4 million. No monies are lost because the monies are carried forward into this financial year. Again, then under 7.2.1 are the significant ups and downs and movements for last year. And again, I just won't go through those in any depth because I'm sure members have read them. Then as a final part of the executive summary, under 7.3.1, it indicates there that our reserves, which are general reserves, as at the 31st of March 2020, stand at £4.7 million, which equates to 3.7% of the council's net revenue expenditure. And as you recall, our corporate reserves policy states that we need our general reserves and to lie in between 3.5% and 4% of net revenue expenditure. So as you can see, we're at 3.7%. Appendix A is the actual statement of accounts itself, which I won't go through in any depth, but it's evident on the contents page there, sets out the actual content of the statement of accounts, which commences with the narrative report from page 1 to 21. The core financial statements are found on pages 24 to 29, and notes to the actual statement of accounts then are shown at pages 30 to 100, and the annual governance statement is also included as part of the statement of accounts pack, and that's on page 105 to 140. So again, Chair, if I pause there and ask if there are any questions, and before we go to the recommendation and 2.1.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Members, any questions? Yes, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just going on what Steve said there, that obviously a lot of hard work has gone into the during the last financial year, with the revenue surplus at 2.891 million. Can I just ask, obviously with Storm Dennis as well, the council paid out, I think it cost them £250,000. Would that be included in this as well?
It is, Declan, yes. So that's part of the net surplus.
Yeah.
Okay, so it just shows that a lot of good work has gone into this. Okay, thank you.
I think, Steve, it was 248,000 is the figure there.
Yes, that's right. That's how much we actually paid out. That was the actual expenditure incurred on the revenue side, and that is included then within that net overall surplus, so it has already been factored in there.
Am I right in saying, Steve, that we couldn't claim for anything under 250,000?
What we could claim for, we had a threshold of £241,000.
Okay.
So we did claim back
Small
a
amount.
massive £7,000 there, Chair.
Yeah, but it's better than nothing. Okay, any other questions from members? If not, I've got a few questions, Steve. It's on page 18, paragraph 7.1.2, under the heading People and Performance, and underneath that, Children Looked After. And it refers there to a net budget deficit of 669,000 due to additional placements, extra fostering agencies placements, and increased costs in respect of court, legal, and professional fees. My question is, are there many additional residential placements which have outside the County Borough Council's boundary? And are there extra costs for being outside of the area?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I don't have the elements of the costs, but on the residential placement side, out of the placements that we have at the end of the financial year, we had 1 in county and we had 13 out of county. And I have got the total spend. The total spend of in county and out of county was £3.2 million. So that's 14, 1 in county and 13 out of county.
Thank you. So, Steve, when we talk about any cases that have to be placed outside the county, am I right in saying that there are higher costs, and is that the case?
I can see Caris's hand up,
yes.
Chair, and I think Caris might have the answer.
Okay, Caris, you able to help us there?
Yes, Chair. What I can say is that it's the difference is not that it costs more to place young people out of county. The issue is that in order they would normally have some very significant special needs, and that
yes.
was why they were placed in a residential unit out of county. So that would mean that yes, they would be more expensive because some of these specialist residential establishments really are very expensive. But they are there, and the expense is attracted by their special needs rather than by the fact that they've had to be placed out of county. They're only out of county because those sort of units are very few and far between, and you may not have one that's close enough to have any young people in our locality. So does that help answer the question?
Yes, it does. And I presume that some of those cases, or probably the majority, are probably outside Wales because of the speciality. Is that the case, Caris?
It can be, yes. I mean, we do have a couple of young people that I'm just thinking off the top of my head, where their needs are very, very specialised, and there would only be 1 or 2 establishments in the whole of the UK. So, yeah, and they have to be matched to that young person's particular needs. So, yeah, you just have to have the young person go to wherever there is an establishment that may meet their needs.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think there's 2 or 3 other questions. Still on page 18, it's headed independent external care provision, there's a 511,000 net surplus in lower demand for total care hours within the domiciliary care service, and additional direct payments. My question really is it anticipated that the low demand for care hours are likely to continue into this current financial year, Steve?
It's hard to just actually say, and to be honest, because obviously this is quite an unique year at this point in time, and we have got evidence, obviously, of increased costs as well within social care in moving forward. So it's and as you may be aware as well, we are getting Welsh Government support for adult social care up until the second quarter and of this financial year. So obviously that is a marker for the additional cost that we have incurred. So if we are going to get a surplus in this financial year, then it would need some further Welsh Government funding and to assist us in the year, and not only up to the second quarter. So it's hard to basically gauge at this point in time or so early on in the year.
Yeah.
But obviously the results of the pandemic have a widespread issue really across all our services, and especially in social care.
Okay, thank you for that. Again, still on the same page 18, it's under the heading Integrated Family Support Services. That indicates a surplus of 267,000 in respect of the service being transferred back into Merthyr Tydfil. Could I ask, as a result of this service being transferred back here to this local authority, is this surplus a one-off, or are there going to be savings from now on?
Again, Chair, you would expect now that because the service has been transferred back in-house, that you would expect then now, compared to what the figure was, but obviously we would now have revised our budget accordingly in going forward, and to take account of that the actual service is now back in-house. So in going forward, I'd be very surprised if we would have a surplus because of the fact we now have addressed and we've reflected that in-house provision within our budgeting going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Steve, still on page 18, it's the last one on page 18. It's under the heading Supported Accommodation Costs. Refers there to a loss of income for under occupancy of the council-owned homes. So that loss of income, I'm sure that both yourselves, your staff and social services staff and cabinet member concerned are looking at this, but that loss of income, is that likely to continue again into this current financial year?
It's any loss of income that we have in this financial year. There will obviously be a COVID influence as well there. And it's a case of that we are claiming back, or we have claimed back, for loss of income that we have incurred over the first quarter of this financial year. And obviously we'll be lobbying the Welsh Government as well for further monies available for loss of income support in the second quarter onwards. Right. So Again, it's a difficult one to tell because obviously we are in exceptional circumstances in this financial year, and we're not quite sure how things are going to look, I suppose, as we enter into a recovery phase, and whether or not then we get another peak, and then we have perhaps a further lockdown or local lockdown, etc. So it's a difficult one really to gauge, but obviously it is being monitored every week and every month.
Okay, thank you for that. My last two questions are way down the, first one is on page 87. And I think it's under the heading of financial assets, and there's a heading of debtors. And right at the bottom of that block, it refers to, no, sorry, it is in the start of the list there. It refers to the Gethley Day cooperative loan of £388,000. Am I right in saying, looking at that's a loan being paid back over several years, because there's clearly £20,000 less than the loan was in the previous financial year? And am I right in saying that that loan will take several years to clear?
Yes, Clive, that is right. What we've... Trying to find my notes here. Hang on a second. Yes, what we've basically got is that this was a loan which was granted back in 2015, and the loan was for over 25 years.
Right.
So there's, as you rightly say, then there's about £36,000 being written off that loan then, and that loan has been repaid every single year.
Yeah.
But yes, it is quite a long-term loan, so we've got another 20 odd years on that loan.
Right. And the next one again is about a loan. This is on page 107. And this is the one where it says there's a note right at the bottom of the page, and it refers to a loan of in 2014-15, and the balance outstanding is £408,000, which I understand that's to Merthyr Valley's Homes. Again, is this loan part of an agreement to be paid over several years?
Yes, and in fact, this is the same loan, and as we discussed a minute ago with the Gethley Day, it's the same loan.
What's the same one?
Yes, it's the same loan.
Right. Hence because there's a, oh, right, I can see it now. There's a difference in the figures, but it's exactly the same one.
It's the same loan, yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that very much. Any other questions, members? If not, any comments from any members? Yes, Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Steve thanked Adele and the accountancy team for the amount of work that went into it, but I'd like to second that, but also thank Steve as well, because I know when he's worked his socks off in very difficult circumstances to get to where we are. So thank you, Steve, and thank you to your team.
Yes, and could I reiterate those comments, because we're in very difficult times, and this indeed places greater pressure on all staff, and particularly all the staff in the finance department. So can we record our thanks for everybody involved? If there are no other comments, can I ask for someone to move the recommendation on that, and it's under paragraph 2.1, please?
I'll move, Chair.
And could I ask for a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Tubby.
Right.
Thank you very much. And we'll now go through the members to vote for it. Councillor Jeremy Davis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Darren Roberts.
For, Chair.
Councillor Declan Salmon.
For. Just the recommendation is the provisional statement of accounts be noted 2019-2020.
Yeah. Councillor John Thomas.
For, Chair.
Councillor Clive Tubby.
For.
And Robert Williams.
I think he may have lost connection.
Ah, right. Okay. Right. Well, that's carried sufficiently by all the members there. Thank you. Now then, we now go on to item 5, and that's the annual internal audit report for the financial year 2019-2020. And that's to consider report of the head of the Regional Audit Service, pages 165 to 190. And Mark Thomas, you're going to take us through this report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, as the Chair introduced, this is the annual internal audit report for the authority produced by the Regional Internal Audit Service, as you're aware, covering the 4 authorities. It's the most important report of the year from an internal audit perspective, so perhaps I'll start by saying that. But just a couple of points really before I get into the report. This report is in a consistent format now across all 4 councils, so we've spent a bit of time trying to achieve consistency in terms of mirroring that across the 4 authorities, so we're not reinventing the wheel in terms of how these reports are written, taking the best from each in terms of the format and removed duplication and so on. So just to mention that, and in common with some of the earlier reports, I'd just like to thank the internal audit team for the work that has been done to enable this report to be produced, because it reflects the work that's been done during the year. So maybe just as a bit of a preamble, just to make those few points. Just very briefly then, if I take you straight to the introduction and background, which is on page 166 of the agenda pack that you've all got. The purpose of the report is to provide the head of audit's annual opinion, and that's on risk management, governance and internal controls, which I'll go in a more detail on later on, but also to inform the audit committee of the work and performance of the internal audit service for the financial year 2019-20. Paragraph 3.2 of your report identifies there the public sector internal audit standards require the head of internal audit to provide an annual report to support the annual governance statement, which is another report that's coming up later on in the agenda. And this annual report, my annual report, should include a number of key points in the bullet points under paragraph 3.2. So that should contain those bullet points effectively, which it does. So just to mention as well, in accordance with the public sector internal audit standards, the head of audit is responsible for developing a risk-based annual plan, which takes into account the council's risk management framework. And within the standards, there's also a requirement for the head of audit to review and adjust the plan as necessary in response to changes in the council's business, risks, operations, programmes, and so on. And the audit plan was brought to members at the start of this financial year 2019-20. Okay, I think what I'll do, if I can refer you to the appendix 1, starting off at page 170, because it's the annual report, I will take you through the relevant sections before ending up with the annual opinion. So page 170 of your pack, section 1, it just sets out the introduction, which I've already covered effectively in my preamble. If I turn over the page onto page 171, It says there, section 2 is the summary of reviews, internal audit reviews undertaken for 2019-20. Members will be aware on the completion of an audit, generally speaking, a review, an audit opinion is formed providing assurance for management and those charged with governance on how well the internal controls, governance of the system establishment or area review are operating. And we use a scale then in terms of informing how we arrive at our opinion as a guide there. But if I refer you to table 1 on page 172 of your pack, it's paragraph 2.3 at the top of the page. It gives a summary really of the audit opinions that we issued in respect of 2019-20. You'll see there on the far right of the column, the total number of reports where an opinion has been given and a percentage sort of split of those opinions. So you'll see there 75% were given either a good or satisfactory opinion, which is good, positive situation, and then 4 reports given an unsatisfactory or poor opinion, which gives you a percentage of 25%. Now that's a significant improvement from the year before, which is mentioned just for comparison purposes on table 2 of the same page. So I thought it was worth highlighting that positive trend. If I can move you on then to some of the points on page 173, paragraph 211 identifies some of the areas that were given an unsatisfactory or poor opinion, and they related to 2 special investigations, so we don't go into significant detail on those, and 2 then related to 2 particular schools, Goitre Primary School and Cyfarthfa High School. Paragraph 214, sorry, I should say I'll go through a couple of those points in a bit more detail in the next section of the report. But paragraph 214, one of the things that we have to do this year, which is obviously unusual because of the circumstances relating to the pandemic, we have to give a statement as to what extent the pandemic has affected delivery of the audit plan. But because the pandemic, the effective lockdown and so on came quite very late in the financial year, it had little impact on the delivery of the internal audit work for 2019-20, as the testing work had been carried out, enabling reports to be issued and agreed. However, there were 2 reports that have been issued but not yet agreed with management relating to 2 schools that still need to be discussed with those schools. So just to make that point really. Page 174, section 3, I mentioned about the unsatisfactory and poor reports. They related to primary school, and you can see there paragraph 3.2 setting out what the issues were, and similarly paragraph 3.3 relating to Cyfarthfa High School, again setting out what the issues were. Now we will be following up on those unsatisfactory opinions during the year and asking for evidence in terms of how those recommendations have been implemented. And I think it's fair to say in relation to Cyfarthfa High School, they have been proactive in terms of requesting that sort of follow-up to be done sooner rather than later, and providing evidence to us as well in terms of the progress they are making in addressing the recommendations. The other 2 matters were brought to our attention, one by a head teacher and one by a chair of governors in relation to concerns relating to how a private fund and matters linked to a school private fund were being managed. So we haven't had the opportunity yet to discuss those directly with the school because of the situation in terms of the school's closures and so on linked to COVID, but we will be discussing them as soon as we're able to, likely to be September, to finalise those reports. But the opinions still stand because of the issues that we have found in the recommendations we have made. Okay, if I can move you on to page 175 of your pack and the recommendations. Obviously, after every audit, we usually make recommendations, and we categorise those then in terms of priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. And table 4 on page 176 of the agenda pack indicates the number of recommendations that we made in different categories. So 31 were classed as priority 1, urgent, 73 were classed as priority 2, and 28 were classed as priority 3, which is best practice. And all those recommendations have been agreed with the relevant service areas, apart from the 2 reports which I've already referred to linked to the 2 special investigations relating to the private funds. We've excluded those from the percentage figures. If I can just move on to page 177 of the pack and counter fraud work, and it does link to the first report on the agenda today in terms of the arrangements in place for dealing with fraud and those sorts of matters. So that gives a flavour of some of the things that have happened this year. One of the key pieces of work is to follow up on the National Fraud Initiative, which is a national data matching exercise that happens normally every 2 years, but there are extra matches being run on a regular basis. So working very much with the authority and working very much with services, we've identified almost £30,000 worth of recoverable fraud/errors, because it's not necessarily proven fraud, but there may be errors that the authority will be able to recover, and there will be likely other amounts coming forward, but there's some more work needs to be done to actually bottom out some of those matches over the coming weeks in conjunction with the relevant service area. And we will plan to come back to committee on it with a more detailed report on fraud activity later on in the year. We also get asked to look at other matters, investigations, referrals and so on. I've obviously referred to two a little bit earlier. They can take a significant amount of time. They don't all necessarily result in a formal report, but you can see there we had 20. So looking at the report, paragraph 5.4, it's been a decrease from previous years. We had 8 referrals for 1920, which is a decrease from the previous years, but it doesn't necessarily follow that they take less time, because it depends on the nature of those referrals. There's a number of policies that needed to be reviewed and updated. We've done that piece of work, and we do need to follow that through now in terms of getting those formally agreed through the appropriate mechanism within the authority. And I don't know whether any of you have picked this up, but the Wales Audit Wales, as it is now, have published a national report on fraud arrangements. It was published on Friday. As part of that work, they've done a review with all local authorities and have made recommendations, but the national report doesn't refer directly to individual authorities. Generally speaking, it's making general recommendations for authorities to follow through on. On page 178, you just mentioned some key performance measures for the authority in terms of the service. So client satisfaction questionnaires are important. So after every audit, we issue a questionnaire with a number of questions. You'll see there the 14 questions that are asked in terms of providing feedback from the services in terms of how the audit was conducted, how the individual auditor conducted themselves, and so on. So we follow those up after every audit. So every response we had basically commented on that they were satisfied with the way that the audit was conducted, but it is an area for improvement for us in terms of the number of return questionnaires that we do get. So as part of the new audit software that we are procuring for the regional service, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to automate that process to avoid the need for sort of manual follow-up on outstanding returns. Section 7 refers to staff training. Obviously, it's very much a people business, because this auditors actually obviously deal with individual members of staff across the organisation in terms of conducting the audit. So they need to be trained and have the experience to carry out the work. We've got one member of staff who's actually in the process of completing their Association of Accounting Technicians qualifications locally, and we've got other staff across the service who are undertaking SIPFA qualifications and Institute of Internal Auditors qualifications as well. Obviously, there's in-service training and professional development for all staff. A lot of it is done online anyway these days, but that's certainly the case currently given the pandemic, where obviously like this meeting, most things have been done online because we aren't in a position to be able to meet face to face very easily at the moment. So it gives you a flavour of some of the areas that staff have had training on during the last 12 months. Section 8, there's some benchmarking information there. It tends to be historic information because the benchmarking information is always a year out of date by the time the information is collated across Wales. So it gives you a flavour on just a few indicators where the team for Merthyr stands compared to the rest of Wales in terms of percentage of planned audits completed, for example, percentage of clients who are at least satisfied with the service, and the percentage of recommendations accepted versus made. It does mention there paragraph 8.4, that in total 65 pieces of planned and unplanned work were completed, which included the 8 special investigations, but resulting in 16 reports, as I mentioned earlier. If I move on to section 9, which is page 181, and that's just a mention to the public sector internal audit standards. One of the requirements is that I have to give a statement as to whether the service has complied with those standards that we have to do, and I'm able to give that confirmation that we've complied with the standards, and we will have an external review. It's every 5 years, so the next one is due in, I think it's 2022. Section 10 of the report on page 182 just gives a few paragraphs in relation to the progress of the regional service. The regional service was established from the 1st of April 29, at least the expanded part of it. There was previously a regional service covering the Vale of Glamorgan and Bridgend councils. That was expanded from the 1st of April 2019, as members will recall, to also include Merthyr Tydfil and Rhondda and Taff. So just a couple of points there in terms of some key messages. A vision's been established for the service. You can see that under 10.2. 10.3 identified the immediate priorities for the service from the 1st of April. 5 bullet points, as I said, these were all delivered. Some other priorities then, paragraph 10.4 for the first 12 months of the service was to develop a structure for the service, taking account of staff who were transferred in under 2P arrangements, confirm the ICT solution and arrangements, and identify and evaluate different approaches, methodologies for each internal audit team, and identify the most appropriate to adopt, because we still got a situation where we tend to be doing things in 3 different ways to some extent. There's some commonality, and we're building on developing that commonality as we go through. But in terms of progress in relation to those points, a new structure has now been agreed by the board, which consists of the heads of finance, the directors of finance of each authority. We will be looking to implement that as soon as we can, once the COVID pandemic situation allows us to take that forward. New ICT equipment was purchased for all staff to ensure consistency and compatibility, and thankfully they were all laptops, so that enabled the staff to be able to work remotely. That was part of the thinking, not thinking that was for a pandemic, but just thinking generally for staff to be able to work remotely. And as I touched on a little bit earlier, a new software solution has been identified and procured, and we will be rolling that out over the summer and into the autumn in terms of how we deliver our audits, how we do our reporting, which should generate some efficiencies and help us with consistency in terms of the way that we do things as well. Yeah, I was just going to mention on page 183, sort of one of the benefits of the shared service. We have had a maternity leave and a secondment from the team during the year. So what we were able to do through the shared service is to bring in some staff from who were based in Rhondda and Taff, and also in the Bridgend and the Vale team to assist on certain aspects of audit work, both in terms of investigations and some counter-fraud work in terms of the National Fraud Initiative. And we also procured an external provider who's been supporting us with some audits in the other areas to do a piece of work as well in Merthyr Tydfil in social services in particular. So it gives us some flexibility in being able to deal with situations that perhaps would be a little bit more difficult if the service was still a standalone service. Okay, if I can take you on to the key part really, which is the opinion statement for 2019-20, which is on page 184 of your pack. Basically, the head of audit has to give an opinion. So it's the head of audit his own opinion on basically risk management, governance and internal control for the authority. Now, in the past, it always used to be purely based on the work of internal audit. So internal audit would do deliver its planned pieces of work and any other work that needed to be done, draw conclusions based on that work, and then give an annual opinion. Now that changed a couple of years ago when the public sector internal audit standards were updated, that the opinion also needed to take account of any external assurance work that was done in respect of the authority. So that could be Wales Audit Office or Audit Wales as it is now, any other inspection or regulatory body, or anything that was commissioned by the authority or done for the authority. So so that's what I've also had to feed into the overall annual opinion, just to make that point. So if I turn over the page onto page 185 and 186, members will recall there's been a number of issues that have taken place during the year in terms of letters and reports produced by the Wales Audit Office. The authority then requested some support from Welsh Government in terms of assisting it in dealing with the challenges it is facing and so on. That's resulted in a number of reports being produced, particularly by the Wales Audit Office advisor, Mr. Gilbert, and then that led on to the appointment of the Improvement and Assurance Board. So that then resulted in another report being produced, a rapid assessment for Welsh Government, as well as then some further reports from Wales Audit Office produced during the year. So that gives you a flavour of some of the key things that have happened from a governance point of view that have had to inform my opinion. So what I will do is just take you on to page 187 of the agenda pack, and you'll see there are 3 boxes where it basically refers to my opinion on risk management arrangements, governance arrangements, and internal control. And what you'll see there, in terms of risk management, I was satisfied I was able to give a satisfactory opinion in terms of the risk management arrangements. Similarly, in terms of internal control, based on the work that we had done in terms of the audits, and I mentioned the opinions that we'd given earlier on in the report, again, I was happy to give a satisfactory opinion on internal control. But because of the reports and the issues that were raised in those reports relating to concerns around general sort of governance in a broad sense, the capacity specifically, and a range of issues, particularly in the rapid assessment report produced by the board, I felt that I had to give an opinion of unsatisfactory on governance. I've had a number of discussions with key officers and members in the authority over the last week or so for me to rightly explain why I've come up with the opinion that I have. So I've been more than happy to do that. I've tried to reflect sort of some of the positive news as well in terms of what's happened in the authority of late in terms of addressing a number of the actions identified in the rapid assessment report, and a number of positive actions have been taken in terms of appointing to a number of posts, for example, to try and address some of the capacity concerns, the development of the action plan, the detailed action plan to address a number of the issues that's been presented to the board and has now been shared with the Minister, as I understand it. So that's another positive step, and I feel that if those matters are addressed, then that will improve significantly. And perhaps last but not least, Steve has already referred to the very positive financial position at the year end, which was much better than perhaps might have been the case, but that was forecast during the year, to be fair to the authority. So that's also improved the situation. But my opinion is not based on at the end of the year, it's trying to give an overall view for the whole year. So I think it is a balanced opinion based on the things that have happened during the year. It is looking backward. It's not about projecting forward. So it's very much, I would say, the focus of the authority needs to be on moving forward with the support of the board, addressing the improvement that are necessary in terms of the action plan. There's a positive settlement again for this financial year, so that certainly puts the authority also in a stronger position on top of the surplus at the end of the financial year. Perhaps the fly in the ointment, and it's affecting the whole of the public sector and local government, is obviously the impact of COVID, which Steve has mentioned as well, which I've also tried to reflect in the overall opinion. So all of that has resulted in me giving an overall opinion, taking all those things into account of unsatisfactory for the reasons that I've given, but there are positive signs that things are moving in the right direction. So perhaps, Chair, I'll pause at that point and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions from members? Yes, Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mark, and the team for the report. Obviously, a great deal of work goes into these reports. It's not just something that's happened over the last few months. Obviously, it is looking back over the last 12 months. If we listen to the first part of your synopsis, if you like, of the report, it was very, very positive. It was only the last bit to me that seemed quite negative and quite frustrated by that personally. The governance, sorry, the actual internal controls, risk management, you've deemed as satisfactory, and the governance unsatisfactory. I understand those judgments and I accept those judgments. But having sat on the insurance and improvement and insurance board since it was put together, and listened to the debate and the actions raised by the board members with portfolio members and officers, I can see that we're on a journey here, and you're right to point out this is a backward-looking report, and things are not looking so negative moving forward with the assistance that we are having. But for me personally, I find it a bitter pill to swallow for the authority that we've had 2 satisfactory scores, but for governance an unsatisfactory, and then an overall unsatisfactory. So I'd just like to see where the evidence for that is, other than obviously the external letters and the writing to the Welsh Government for assistance. I get all that, but I just can't see how the two make the 2 satisfactory and 1 unsatisfactory make an overall unsatisfactory. It just doesn't sit comfortably with me.
Should I come back on that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Darren, for the question and the points you make. Obviously, I mentioned that I've had a number of discussions with senior officers and members over the opinion, and that's been very much the sort of sentiment in terms of the disappointment, really, in terms of the opinion. And obviously, I've tried to explain it as best I can. Obviously, what I've said is, as I've said this afternoon, but I haven't gone into a huge amount of detail. There's been a number of references to concerns over various aspects of governance, and capacity has been the big one that's run through a number of the reports, both from Wales Audit Office and the rapid assessment report from the board. And obviously, I have to place reliance on any external work that looks at some of the things that I have to comment on. So governance is a key part of that. But because of the issues there, albeit steps are being made to address a number of those, and I referred to those earlier on, and it is, as you rightly mentioned, it is a backward-looking report. It's not about predicting the future or anything. It's weighing up all those things. It's not a sort of simple sort of mathematical formula, if you like, that if you add things together and multiply by a certain number, you come up with the right answer. It is very much an opinion based on weighing up that evidence, and it's, as I also said, it's not as things were on the 31st of March. It's trying to look at the year in its entirety and balancing those things out. I just felt that reading the report a number of times, and even after being questioned on, why I've reached those opinions, I think it is balanced, reflecting the concerns and challenges facing the authority, albeit the authority is making positive progress, as I mentioned, really. But my take on it is that some of the issues contained, particularly in the rapid assessment report, they are affecting the authority as a whole. There are specific things mentioned in those reports around concerns over specific areas and specific aspects, but there are certain things that are affecting the authority as a whole. So that ultimately does have an impact on the way the authority is able to operate, or can do, depending on what's affecting different areas at any given time. But I accept, maybe, what's the word, disappointment, but I have to be objective about it. Obviously, having worked in Merthyr Tydfil for more than 20 years, I've got big affinity for the authority and the people who work there, but I have to put those to one side and try and be as objective as I can. But say, reflecting the concerns in those reports, I think I had no option really other than to give that opinion overall.
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I totally get that, Mark. And, you know, you're a very professional officer when you were with the authority, and, you know, no doubt you're cast with the same mold now. I got no doubts about that at all. Have you actually spoken to anybody from the Improvement Insurance Board about the journey that the local authority are on currently, and you know, what progress we're making there?
No, that's certainly something sorry, Chair.
Go on, Mark, go on.
Yeah, certainly. No, I haven't directly spoken to members of the board. That's something I certainly considered doing. But I felt the most appropriate thing to do was to actually, you know, look at the reports that have actually been published, because you know, any conversations I have would be, you know, taking account of what people's views are at a particular time. So I think the rapid assessment report was dated December, but it wasn't published until the end of February 2020. So just before the COVID situation happened, probably around about the time of the flooding and so on. So I have obviously spoken to officers, been given information in terms of the progress that's been made, and I've tried to reflect those points in the report as well. But also I've looked at the Wales Audit Office annual report that was published at the end of January, and that was presented to Audit Committee at the beginning of March. And, you know, the view there was given there was it was too early to tell really in terms of whether the required improvements had been made. But so, as I say, it wasn't trying to take a view at the year end, is trying to reflect everything that's happened over the last 12 months. But it's very much looking back. It's not looking forward, as I say. So what I've said to both officers and members is, yes, I can understand the people being disappointed, but it's about carrying on that journey. I think you used the term, Darren, the authority is very much on a journey, and it's made a good start on that journey, and the financial position is much healthier than, you know, I think anybody would have thought going back perhaps 12, 18 months ago. So taking all those things into consideration, it's in a much better place than it might have been.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? No? Any comments from any member? Yes, Councillor Roberts, and then after that, Councillor Salmon.
I haven't got my hand up, Chair.
Oh, all right,
Councillor
sorry.
Salmon.
Right, sorry, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just continuing on from what Darren has said, I've heard what Mark has said, but I'm also a little bit frustrated. I think probably all the other councillors are as well. Mark said himself, this is the most important report of the year. And he said significant improvement on last year, but we've still been given unsatisfactory. Mark, you've mentioned some positives, but unfortunately, all the public will see and the press will pick up on is the word unsatisfactory. With the amount of money that the local authority has, all the work the local authority has done, that's the officers, the cabinet, the councillors, to achieve an almost £3 million surplus outturn, and the money that has been put back into reserves, I think probably all 33 members are going to feel, I won't say aggrieved, but very, very frustrated with the unsatisfactory mark.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments from members? If not, I'll take you through the.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If there are no other comments, I would possibly like to make an amendment to the recommendation, if at all possible. Am I permitted to do that?
Yes.
Yeah. It says that 2.1 on page 166 that members give due consideration to the annual internal audit report for the financial year 2019-20, including the head of audit's annual opinion on the council's control environment in relation to governance, risk management and internal control. I would just like to put onto the end of there that if any evidence could be brought forward as to why we've got the It's not a recommendation, actually. Sorry, it's a recommendation, but not to that recommendation, if that makes sense. I'm babbling now, but it's mainly before I can make a cast iron judgment on this, because it's not sitting comfortably with me, as I explained earlier on. I would like to see some more evidence about how Mark came to his opinion, because it is very much Mark's opinion. I don't agree with it. From the sounds of it, Councillor Salmon doesn't agree with it. And I don't know about the other members of the audit committee. So I just like to see more evidence before I can actually agree with that unsatisfactory appraisal.
Chair, can I make
yes.
a suggestion therefore?
Yeah.
That what Councillor Roberts is in effect suggesting is an amendment to the recommendation.
Yes.
And that would be, I think, that the report is deferred pending receipt of some further information to enable councillors to consider the recommendation further. Does that just about say what you want to say, Councillor Roberts, and then you will have a chance to look at it again if you have further evidence?
I'm happy to go with that, Caris. I mean, it's down to the chair at the end of the day. I'm quite happy to see more evidence and then making a judgment on it. But as it stands at this moment in time, I couldn't accept that unsatisfactory. So if the chair deems, yes, we'll bring it back with more evidence, I'd be happy to go along with that.
Chair, could I come in there if that's okay?
Yeah. Yes, certainly.
Yeah, just to add, really, yeah, fully respect, everybody's entitled to their opinion in terms of all this, and, it goes with the territory sometimes, and not everybody will agree. This is a strange one, really. It's not like a normal type of report where it's the committee has to approve the recommendation or approve the opinion, because it is my opinion. It's different. It's not the audit committee's opinion. It's my opinion. So that's what I would just mention that, really. In terms of additional evidence, other than referring to the reports produced by the board and the Wales Audit Office and so on, I don't have any further evidence to add to what I've already said. So obviously, depending on the committee decides, if the committee decides to defer it or to give their comments on it, that's absolutely fine. But I'm not sure whether asking for further evidence, I can actually provide anything other than the reports that have already been produced by the various bodies. But it is the head of internal audit's opinion. It's not the audit committee's opinion, and that's different to the annual governance statement, which comes up next, which is very much the authority's view of the world, if I can put it that way.
Can I ask Councillor Roberts, because you were talking about an amendment originally. We've had a suggestion from Caris Edwards. We were talking about deferring the recommendation until any further additional evidence is produced. So can I ask you, Councillor Roberts, what you wanted to?
Well, based on the recommendation of deferring it, Mark has come back now and said that he's got no evidence to give. It is pretty much his opinion and his department's opinion. So I think it's a case of we're going to have to agree to disagree on it. I can't see that deferring it is going to benefit anyone, this committee or the local authority. So just as well deal with the matter now, Chair, if you're happy to do so.
Yeah, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just going on what Mark said and what Darren has said, that the recommendation is only that the members give due consideration to the annual internal audit report, including the head of audit's annual opinion. We've given our due consideration. Both Darren and myself have said what we think of it, which is an opinion, and Mark's got his opinion. So really, I think just go ahead, I think.
So you were suggesting, Councillor Salmon, that we, with the current wording of the recommendation in the report, that we go along with that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it only says that due consideration is given, and I think that is what we have done, and that is the recommendation.
Yes. Okay. Councillor Tubby.
Yes, I agree with that as well, really, because we're only being asked to give due consideration, and I don't think there'll be more evidence coming back to us in a future meeting, so I'd go along with that as well.
Okay. Any other comments, anybody? No? If that's the case, then I think we will go to I'll read out the recommendation in its entirety before we come to the vote. And that's in paragraph 2.1 at the start of this report. And it says that members give due consideration to the annual internal audit report for the financial year 2019-20, including the head of audit's annual opinion on the council's control environment in relation to governance, risk management and internal control. So I will put that recommendation to you. Is there a mover and a seconder to that?
Yeah, I can move that recommendation, Chair.
And as a seconder?
I'll second it, Chair.
I'll second it. Oh,
right, seconded by Councillor Jeremy Davies. And I'll call you in order to vote. Councillor Jeremy Davies?
For.
Councillor Darren Roberts?
For, Chair.
Councillors Declan Salmon?
Chair, I agree that members have given due consideration to the annual internal audit report, including the head of audit's annual opinion. Thank you.
Councillor John Thomas?
Yeah, for, Chair.
Councillor Clive Tubby?
For.
Robert Williams? No. And myself for, and that is carried. Thank you for that. We now go on to item 6, and it's the draft annual governance statement for the financial year 2019-20, and to consider the report of the Chief Executive, pages 191 to 194.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's my turn again. Now, as you just introduced, this is the draft annual governance statement for 1920. It's a covering report, and as Steve mentioned earlier, the actual annual governance statement is part of the accounts, so the actual detail is further back in your agenda pack. But if I just give a brief summary, internal audit does this, as in produces this document on behalf of the council based on information that we are provided with by a range of different officers across the organisation. It's quite a big piece of work, but basically, the council, as part of its arrangements for corporate governance, is required to undertake an annual review of internal control and governance, and the resulting annual governance statements must be included in the statement of accounts. The annual governance statement therefore provides an assessment of the council's corporate governance arrangements and an appraisal of the controls in place to manage the council's key risks, and identifies where improvements needs to be made. And basically what that is saying, and this is obviously for the council's opinion, not for the internal audit's opinion, from the review, assessment and ongoing monitoring work undertaken, we have reached the opinion that there is general compliance with existing governance arrangements, but there are a number of improvements identified that need to be implemented to strengthen those arrangements. The support of the Improvement and Assurance Board will assist us in addressing the challenges the Council continues to face. The annual governance statement will be reviewed as part of the external audit on the statement of accounts, and this happens every year. And the statement should reflect any governance issues right up to the date that the Auditor General for Wales signs off the statement of accounts for 2019-20. Therefore, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been considered and included within the AGS and may well need to be updated in light of any events that happen between now and the accounts being signed off. But basically, the legislative background to this is set out in section 3 of the report on page 192 and the accounts and audit regs and so on. and the SIPFA delivering good governance in local government framework. So that they are all the relevant pieces of legislation and guidance that we have to consider while we pulling together the annual governance statement and conducting the review of effectiveness. So basically that background is all set out there in section 3 of the report, and I've already said that the actual detailed document is attached to the accounts from page 129 to page 164. I just had to check then which pages they were on. So if you wanted to refer to the actual document, it's set out there. But basically 3.8, paragraph 3.8 on page 193 of the covering report, one of the main issues raised and highlighted over the last few years has been the ability of the council to carry on meeting service objectives and delivering positive outcomes for its customers and clients whilst meeting the continuing challenges year on year in council funding, the impact this has on the services delivered. As part of the requirement of producing an annual governance statement, the statement has to set out any significant governance issues that it's had to deal with. Now, they are identified on page 158 to 161 of the pack, and the areas that have been identified there are the financial pressures, and that's obviously been in the annual governance statement for a number of years. The addition is to do with COVID-19 and the impact that has had on the authority, both financially and some of the changes that had to be made from a governance point of view, albeit for the tail end of the financial year. The flooding that took place in February, again, that's a major issue that the authority had to deal with, which was a major challenge for all authorities affected by the flooding. The introduction of the Improvement and Assurance Board, that is a governance issue in the sense that the Welsh Government have deemed it appropriate with the agreement of the authority that it would be helpful for the authority to have a board. The capacity issues the authority is grappling with as well, and educational attainment. So they are the governance issues that have been identified in the annual governance statement. But having said all that and reflecting some of the improvement in the financial position that we heard about earlier on, that has all been reflected in the governance statement. So the overall conclusion for the annual governance statement as it currently stands is, as referred to in paragraph 310, from the review, assessment and ongoing monitoring work undertaken, we have reached the opinion, and this is the authority, and it would be signed off by the leader and the chief executive in due course in when the accounts are signed off in probably September, October. There is general compliance with existing governance arrangements, but there are a number of improvements identified that need to be implemented to strengthen those arrangements. And the support of the Improvement and Assurance Board will assist the council to address the challenges it continues to face. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions, and maybe Steve and Caris may be able to assist if there's more general questions as well linked to the statement.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any questions from members? No? Any comments from any members? Yes, Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the annual governance statement is a very fair appraisal of where the current situation is within the local authority. It mentions COVID, the floods, financial issues that we've had to deal with, and obviously the work of the Improvement Insurance Board. So I'm more than content with the annual governance statement for this year.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments from members? No? If not, I'll take you to the actual word in the recommendation. It states in paragraph 2.1 at the start of the report, the draft annual governance statement for 2019-20 be recommended for adoption by the leader and the chief executive, and that will happen later in the year if this is agreed. So I'll call the members one by one. Councillor Jeremy Davis.
Chair,
Yeah,
somebody
Chair.
move.
Chair.
Somebody move it, have you not?
I beg your pardon, you're quite right, Caris.
I'll move the recommendation, Chair.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second it, Chair.
Yeah, sorry about that. We're doing so well then. Start again. Councillor Jeremy Davis.
For, Chair.
Councillor Darren Roberts.
Yes, for, Chair.
Councillor Declan Salmon.
I agree, Chair.
Councillor John Thomas.
Yes, for, Chair.
Councillor Clive Tummy.
For, Chair.
Robert Williams. No, and myself for. That is agreed. Thank you. We now go on to item 7. That's the Internal Audit Charter, to consider the report of the head of the Regional Audit Service, pages 195 to 1216. This is again yourself, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you introduced, this is the Internal Audit Service Charter for 2021. In compliance with the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, audit committees are asked to approve a internal audit charter for each authority. So obviously that's what's presented to you today. What I'd just like to mention is this is another document that we've tried to now achieve a consistency across the 4 authorities. So I spent quite a bit of time in terms of developing the charter, writing a fairly comprehensive document, taking the best from the 4 separate charters that existed previously, and trying to make sure it covers all the relevant ground and reflecting the different terminology and different positions within each authority as well. So basically, the charter there essentially sets out the purpose and authority and responsibility of internal audit, its independence and objective. I can't even say the word objectivity, the need for proficiency and due professional care, and also sets out quality assurance and improvement programme. Paragraph 3.8 on the cover and report sets out the role of audit committee in relation to internal audit is to oversee its independence, objectivity, performance and professionalism, support the effectiveness of internal audit process, and promote the effective use of internal audit within the assurance framework. And one of the key roles for demonstrating that for the audit committee oversight is the approval of the internal audit charter. I wasn't planning on going through the document in detail, other than to say that it does comply with what's required from a public sector internal audit standards perspective, and it's already gone through one other audit committee and will be going through another 2 audit committees in due course, but it's there for members to consider and hopefully approve, all being well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions from members? No? Any comments from any member? No? If not, I'll take you to the recommendation, again, which is in paragraph 2.1 of the report, that members consider and approve the Regional Audit Shared Service Charter for 2020-21. Could I ask for a mover, please?
I'll move, Chair.
Seconder?
Second, Chair.
Seconded by Councillor Jeremy Davis. I'll take you in order of names again. Councillor Jeremy Davis.
For, Chair.
Councillor Darren Roberts.
Yes, in agreement, Chair.
Councillor Declan Salmon.
I'm in agreement, Chair.
Councillor John Thomas.
For, Chair.
Councillor Clive Tummy.
For, Chair.
And Mr. Robert Williams. And myself, for. So that recommendation is agreed. We now go on to item 8, and that's a reflection and evaluation of the meeting and the update from myself. Well, this has been somewhat different, to say the least. I think that we've all come through it without any particular issues, but I am concerned that one of our new members, Councillor Rogers, wasn't, for reasons that I'm sure we'll find out, couldn't join us. And I think Robert Williams has had some problems with looking at the times he's been in and out of the meeting. So we obviously have some few issues to iron out there. But I think we've aired and discussed and ask the appropriate questions throughout the meeting. Item 9, any other business deemed urgent by the chair? I have none. Just to say, I want to thank everybody involved. That includes elected members, lay member Robert Williams, all the staff involved with the reports, particularly the audit staff and the finance staff, working in very difficult circumstances. And I want to add that my thanks to the Democratic staff who've helped us all to set up this meeting. So is anybody getting any other business? No. Can I thank you all for your attendance, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Thank you.